Welcome to the Nerdlore podcast, where we discuss stories, theories, and lore. I'm your host tonight, TheRealSkandle. Today I'm going to do a one-on-one interview with my guest, BGoode77. We're going to
Yeah.
discuss some Red Dead Redemption 2. I get to hear about this a lot at work. Um, it sounds really fun. I just don't own an Xbox, so I don't play with them. So why don't you start by giving us a little bit of background on Red Dead Redemption? Tell us a little bit about. Let's just start with a little bit about Red Dead Redemption.
All right. Well, two things first. Is it more comfortable for you if I sit all the way down at the bottom of my screen like you're doing?
I can't.
And
I can't help it. I have to show off my cool shit in the background, and like whenever
do
I
I
lean back, and I get to go all the way down here.
do I need a headset too? I don't.
You technically don't need one. I do hear that only true gamers wear them.
Oh
Um,
well, then I'll take it off then. So definitely not a true gamer. Uh, so like from my perspective for the game, I think one of the important things is like I'm 42 now, and gaming's not really been part of my life for a while. I got little kids that run around the house and all that stuff.
right.
But 8 years ago, or 9 years ago now, I guess, when the first one came out, that was one of the only games I'd played in a long time, and so like kind of really affected me with like graphics and the game story. And I'd played like earlier Rockstar Grand Theft Auto games, and this felt very different. And then all of a sudden, it took 8 years for the sequel to come out, um, and they kind of did a lot of interesting like correlations between the first game and the second game, but they just added so much more to it that changes the experience of the video game, really.
Okay. So what exactly is Red Dead Redemption? Like I hear you talking about how why you started playing it and how it got to where it is. Can you like give us for some people who've never played before, can you give us like a quick or some
Yeah,
summary about
sure.
it?
I mean, the first game was Red Dead Revolver that I think came out on PS2 maybe. That was a really long time ago, and it's really not connected to the series at all, but a lot of people view it as like a three-part series. And the first game that came out 8 years ago, just Red Dead Redemption. I grew up watching westerns with my dad, and I kind of like the grittier, not John Wayne ones, but like the Clint Eastwood ones, like
Hmm.
where there's not a good guy and a bad guy, and there's that whole dynamic of it's just people trying to survive in a world, and you do what you have to do to survive. And sometimes people pick the right choices, and sometimes they don't. And that first Red Dead Redemption game really kind of encapsulated that. Um, the character in that game was a really fully realized character, and probably ended up becoming probably my favorite video game character of all time. Um, just in the way you kind of connect with what he's trying to do, but his story is very scripted in the first game. It's a man who basically is forced to find his family. He has to kill a bunch of people. The government has his family, and then if he does all these things for them, he gets his family back. So he's a guy with like not a lot of morals who has to do the right thing because he's forced to do the right thing. And the story is very played out that way, and you identify with a lot of things he did. In the new Red Dead game, and Red Dead Redemption 2, which is the prequel, they do something a little different. They create a character that, yeah, he's kind of got a personality. He's kind of funny. He's a little gruff and short with people, but for the most part, they allow you to fill in the moral story for him. So he doesn't have a mission that he's on. He's just living in this world in a gang because that's all he's ever known, and they're the only friends he has, and he's not really satisfied with how life's going. And he makes good choices and bad choices, but a lot of those things are left up to you as the player. So you have a far less realized character, but as a player, you far more identify with the game because you feel like you are that character on the screen in the third person kind of mode. And I know playing like Grand Theft Auto, like if I played Vice City, I wasn't the Vice City guy. If I played San Andreas,
Uh-oh.
character. But you finally have this character where there's just enough of the personality missing and enough decision making on the player's end that you kind of become that character in the game. And you didn't have that experience in the first game. It was really all about that you liked that character. In this game, it's you just really like what you're doing with that character in the game. I mean, if anyone's played Rockstar games, it has that very similar open world sandbox. Really, the big difference is the scope of it. I mean, not only is the map huge compared to like previous Rockstar games. They took the entire map from the first game minus the Mexico section and just added twice as much area, but because you're traveling by horse or on foot during the entire game, it takes forever to get from one end of the map to the other. You can't just get in a helicopter or in a race car. You actually just have to get on a horse and plot around the map for, 20 minutes just to get somewhere in the game. So that's you want to be very purpose driven when you're doing stuff. But really one of the big differences is just the sheer amount of the game there is to explore. I remember being a little kid and getting the first Zelda game when I think I was in fourth grade, and you like explored every single nook and cranny on the screen. You were looking
Yeah.
for the cracks in the wall, and even if you didn't see the crack, you were throwing bombs everywhere.
Mhm.
You went in every corner and you pushed the button like on every single little item or bush, trying to find like secret clues and stuff. This game, it's not possible. There's too much. You go into just a basic one room shack, and there might be, 50 things you can click on there if you want to and pick them up and look at them. They almost made it so overwhelming that you really can't discover the entire game. And I liked that aspect of it. It left you kind of always realizing there was something new to find in the game every time you played.
So, is that why you play it? Because it is the storyline is good. Is it, or is there like a? I hear you say it's an open world. Is it like an MMO? Is it? I know that there's a social environment where you specifically have these hilarious clan names and stuff like that or
Yeah.
posses that you guys call them.
Yes.
Um, is that what makes it like if there wasn't any social uh attachment to it, is it a good game on its own?
Yes, I mean, like, the story mode itself for those who still play games of story mode. I mean, a couple of years ago, everyone said story, no one cares about stories in video games anymore. And then all of a sudden, you had Zelda's Breath of the Wild or whatever that game is, and then you had Red Dead come out, and now everyone's kind of clamoring for it. Let's make games again that have stories that feel like you're in a movie, making choices in a movie, and games now that are getting away from just like online campaign stuff. Like people, for Call of Duty was just making online games for a while, and then the one that came out with World War II a few years ago, they finally like put back in a full fledged kind
Mhm.
of campaign mode thing. And I've always been more about story because I grew up with video games in the 80s and the 90s where that was what drove it. There was no online component for it.
Right.
Um, so as far as the story mode for Red Dead, if people appreciate stories, I think I can't think of a better game with a better story. And it's really just the way it's told. It's not linear at all, like a lot of Rockstar games. You can go to do a mission, and then 4 days later of your real life, you still haven't gotten to that part of the map because you've been waylaid so many times by other random things that pop up in the game.
Mhm.
It's almost like the game prevents you from just going from point A to point B because it realizes that's not how life works. And you can pick up a Rockstar Grand Theft Auto game and kind of blitz through all those little missions and kind of solve the game. And this is one of those games that doesn't really allow you to do that. And for some people, that's frustrating because the game is incredibly slow. The pace is. Everything's very purpose driven in the game. You go into the camp and your guy can't run anymore. You have to do chores like pick up hay bales and take them to the other side. Like just moving hay bales might take you 3 or 4 minutes. You have to get water. You have to go hunt for food for your camp. So even just sustaining life at the camp and not getting outside to do all the other, yellow story missions or the white character missions or random stranger encounters or even just interacting with the NPCs in the game, they have almost an exhaustive dialogue. Unlike other games where you might talk to an NPC, might be, "Hey, how you doing?" Or like, "Hey, hello," or "Watch out." They have almost an exhaustive list of conversations, and each NPC has a different personality from the other NPCs. And they hired like at least over 1,000, I think, actors to provide all the voices for the game, just for all those little random things. So, like, as far as a story mode, it's engrossing because you kind of get to make your own story. Um, Online mode has a lot of those components. They've pulled it out of beta and added more. They have random encounter stranger missions. You have your yellow missions you go after, and the pink little quick missions. And now they've added 4 different jobs. You can be a trader where you got to hunt and sell products that you make from hunting. A collector, we just go around and find collectible items and sell them to a woman so you can make money. You have the bounty hunter, which is pretty self-explanatory. And now you have a moonshiner. So even just in the context of online, they're trying to build it up kind of like story mode where you could just go and play online on your own in a lobby of 20 or 30 people and really not see these 20 or 30 people because the map's so big and just kind of have your own story existence even without like any kind of social aspect of playing with friends or other people online. Now, once you start adding those kind of components to the online thing, social, I think the online portion then really stands out separate from story mode, just because you now have the added thing of like working as a team and laughing and having fun and setting each other on fire. Our favorite thing in our posse is for $80 when they came out with the trader roll, you could buy like a little claw hammer and we just run around bashing each other's skulls in because the blood splatter is hysterical and the sound it makes is so gross. You just start, having your own thing. Our posse, everyone's shirtless and we wear scarves. I couldn't find my scarf tonight. But you run across other posses where, like they're all wearing bib overalls and have red hair and they don't have shoes. So like you run into these groups where you realize people are identifying by their clothing because it's easier when you stand out when you're in a big giant fight because you can see who your teammates are, kind of thing. But one of the things that I think people get involved with in the online mode that you can't really in stories, and it's a world I was unfamiliar with, is like people get into role playing with the video games.
Oh no.
Something that never would have occurred to me where they play and stay in character in their posse with their friends, so
That's
they're all
what's
like
up.
basically acting in a movie. And for me, that's a lot more effort to kind of put into it. Um, I'll change. I'm big into buying outfits for my character and mix and matching stuff and
Dressing
giving
up
the
your
outfits
Barbie doll.
different names, and then you get to put the
Different
outfits on your
names?
horse.
You have
Yeah,
your
so
stuff
you name your
named.
outfits, and you can make up to 10 outfits, and then you can put, I think, 7 or 8 on your horse. So at any given moment, anyone in our posse might just like change their clothes just to mess with people and start laughing. Like I have one guy who's got like an American flag poncho on and like a yellow tricorder Revolutionary War hat, and he's called America. And I just run around screaming, thought this is America. And uh, and then you
Oh,
laugh, and
I'm
then so
sorry. I
yeah,
thought this was America.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America. Um, yeah, and all my friends have their posses and all their names are hysterical, really only to us, kind of thing. So there's that, that group dynamic if you want to play with friends, but they keep on adding to online mode to the point that eventually online mode is probably going to feel a lot more like story mode, but just with other people as well.
Right. Um, so is are your outfits purchased through like microtransactions or
Yeah, it's interesting for Red Dead Online, and I don't know if it's something they're starting off with, but pretty much everything's attainable for free.
Mhm.
And the grinding that's involved to get like gold, which is the biggest commodity in the game, is really not that difficult. So you have cash, which for a lot of your basic items, you spend cash, like your weapons and your bullets and basic shirts and pants and things. Once you get to the fancier stuff, it might be like 2 or 3 gold bars. Um, but they've really made it so that you don't have to spend any of your money at all. I don't think there's that hard grind like people talk about in Fortnite and other games. Like you can pretty much go online and make a ton of cash at once and knock out 5 gold bars by doing daily challenges that aren't terribly difficult. Sometimes just like eat camp stew or skin a raccoon or jump your horse over a fence 10 times, and then that's like the easy parts of the difficulty of getting money for those microtransactions. So I think at this point, when the game first came out, there was a deal for like $5. You got a lot of gold bars, and I was like, I'll spend $5. Gold bars are hard to get, but now they're not.
Mhm.
And my friends that play, none of them have bought anything. There's no need for microtransaction. You can pretty much get everything you want. I think now I'm sitting at 150 gold and like $10,000. I have nothing to spend my stuff on. So if anything, their economy is far more lopsided in favor, I think, of the gamer.
Okay. So, you always talk about this moonshining thing. So, like you said, there's 4 different jobs you can get in online mode. You and your friends have decided to go with the moonshiner, and can you give us some background on how these extra skills or jobs that you can do now, what each one does, and kind of what you guys do?
So moonshining is kind of designed around about making quick cash without a lot of effort. So like in the end, you're getting maybe half the money you'd get by doing the fur trader, but you don't have to go and kill like 30 animals and get resupplies for tanning solutions and things like that. So you can just go, go to your little guy in your little moonshine shack and tell him like, I want to make strong moonshine and I want to flavor it with these kind of herbs or whatever. They give you choices, and then that makes it worth more. And you can make weak or middle or really strong moonshine, and so like in about 50 minutes in the game, I can produce like strong moonshine. And then your deliveries are really short. If you turn too fast or go off the path a little bit, you might break some of your bottles and lose money. But in the end, like it's a cheap way for you and your posse to all kind of make money really quickly. But you also run into like it's funny they for each role they didn't really come up with a lot of bad guys, I would say. Like they have like the person that introduces the role to you and works with you in that role. And then sometimes there's like little special things that you can do that maybe involve like a slight story mode with your role. But with Moonshiner, they introduced the IRS agents in the game. And so we've estimated we've probably killed the entire government's worth of tax collectors by now. They're all apparently like sharp shooting sniper rifle
Oh,
guys in nice suits because unlike anyone else in the game, they will kill you over and over again. And so you take your little moonshine wagon, you can go through their little stop, you can kill them all if you want, or you can let them say like you can pass, or they'll say like we're gonna inspect your wagon, or they can be like he's got moonshine, and then they just open up fire and lay waste to you, kind of thing. So there's a whole dynamic where you roll in, and then your posse's kind of flanking to try and take people out. So there's like a lot of fun kind of strategy with it, but for the most part, you can just barrel through. But really, just the idea that you have a moonshine shack, and upstairs it's like a normal house, and below there's like a whole bar and dance room, and you can get your own band, and they got the little washboard and guys playing banjo and all sorts of kind of goofy turn of the century southern kind of style things going on. You can get drunk in your bar and start slapping your friends around. And there's like 10 different kinds of slaps, and some are just like little tiny little face taps, and some are backhands that knock them on the floor. And when you get those, you just start laughing, kind of thing. But Moonshine kind of introduced them.
so is it
Really, it's
random? So like you're just slapping
yeah.
and randomly you'll
So
do a
sometimes you'll
different
be like,
slap?
yeah, sometimes you'll be like this, and you'll tap them on the face. And then sometimes you backhand them, and sometimes you like spin around, they'll spin around, and then like they'll fall and hit their head on the bar and fall backwards. Um, my one friend got to the point where his character got so drunk, and none of us were able to replicate it, but you hit the B button to slap people. And the thing is, that's not your attack button in the normal game. It was actually my 9-year-old son that discovered you could get drunk and slap people. Um, and so his character was so drunk that when you hit the button, all you do is lunge and put his arms around you and like hug you and pat you because that was all his character could do. So he was just going around hugging people. He was so drunk. And it's really funny things like that that like most gamers who don't push things to the limit won't find in the game that are kind of rewarding. And I think almost everything in the game has that. If you push it just a little further, you get really funny responses. Like the drunker you get, your menu button choices that pop on the screen, like the spelling starts falling apart and it starts becoming like really chaotic. And then you don't get to the point where you don't even know what the choices are anymore unless you've memorized your buttons, which isn't terribly difficult, but it's just funny. And then the screen gets all like wobbly and discolored to the
Right,
point that it actually makes you sick to play
right.
the game because when you turn around, it's all yeah. So they do a really good job. And if you black out, you wake up like really far away from your camp, laying on the ground in the middle of nowhere. So there's always some interesting repercussions.
Nice. That's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Uh, so you talk about dying in this game,
Yeah.
but it's a respawn kind of thing. It's not
Right.
like you die, your character's done for.
Mhm.
Um, that's the only question I had for that one. I thought you were
I
gonna
mean,
elaborate a little bit on that.
because it's like a Rockstar Online game, and dying really doesn't mean much if you're not really into your character statistics, and I'm certainly not unless it's headshots, and my friends know I really care about headshots. Um, that you dying doesn't make a difference. So that one of the things we'll do is someone will be at camp cleaning their guns because you have to clean your guns or else they don't work anymore. They
Right.
don't shoot as far, and they'll jam, and then you just like steal their horse and jump it off a cliff. And that's fun. We try not to set each other's horses on fire. We do have some rules of things,
You do have
because
some standards.
yeah, we actually shame each other. We pretty much have mostly respect. And like if you throw dynamite at someone and blows up their horse, you feel really bad. If it's at the point where you can still revive it from dead, like it's your job to go revive it, so they don't have to waste their own revive, kind of stuff. Um, One of my friends likes to push it to the limit. Like when you have a camp, and if you decide to leave your posse and join someone else's, your camp becomes like dead. It's no longer yours, but it's still on the map and it's still there. And so the guy that runs your camp's still there, but he's not beholden to you, so you can start a fight with him. And I have a camp dog, so my dog is still there, although it's not my dog anymore. It's just a random dog that used to be my dog. So my one friend like runs up and kills it because he's the one that kills dogs. And and then I get mad at him for doing it, but I don't notice then when I go turn away that he takes the dead dog and puts it on my horse. And then so I ride off and it's dark in the game, and all of a sudden I realize my dead, bleeding, stabbed dog is like on the back of my horse. And so like those are the kind of fun things you get to do is kill your friends' dogs and put them on your horse and ride them around town.
That sounds
Because
awful.
dying does not make a difference.
And
So
now, when your pets die, is it the same thing? Like, if they kill your horse, does it come back, like,
yeah,
respawn?
if you buy horse insurance, which that's like 100 and some dollars, something, there's no reason why you would. When it dies, you can whistle and it'll come back. Sometimes there's a delay, and you get scrawny nag, which is like the world's worst horse. And until scrawny nag either dies or you tell it to flee, your horse you keep on calling, and scrawny nag's going to show up the whole time. So really, what I try not to do, but the best thing to do is just like after a couple minutes, you just take your gun and shoot Scrawny Nag in the head and then call your horse. I can't bring myself to just shoot horses in the face in the video game. I have my real life my real life moral code interferes with my video game. I can't do bad things like shoot horses. So
Right.
yeah.
We actually talk about that dynamic in another podcast. We talk about uh, the effect of your own moral compass affecting these, like, choose your own adventure style of games. Uh,
Right.
a
It's
lot
an
of people.
interesting
Go ahead.
it's an interesting dynamic being that I never came from like an online kind of background, and really the only 2 games I've really ever played with any regularity are both the Red Dead games. Um, I have my one friend that I think works out his serial killer instincts that he never like acted upon in real life, and he gets to live and laugh hysterically at all the mayhem he causes. Where like I I can't shoot a dog. I don't want to shoot a horse. I don't enjoy going into a town and just killing people and causing a giant riot. Although when it happens, I think it's hysterical. But um, I have some kind of moral purpose. And I remember when I played the first game and I beat it, and I was like, "This is the best game I've ever played." I was like, "I'm gonna play it again, and this time I want to be bad because I played the whole game good." And like about 20, 30 minutes in the game, I realized I couldn't do it. I loved the character too much, and I couldn't make him bad, and I felt bad for trying to be bad. Um, like, it's just weird how much you can, like, I don't know, your personal life, if you kind of have that empathy that you might care for fake things that don't actually exist. My one friend, he's obsessed with grooming and feeding his horse. He loves his horse, and he takes care of his horse all the time to the point that it's really obsessively weird. But he just talks about that. He's like, "I love this horse like it's a real horse." I'm like, "It's not though." But I can't kill it, so
Because you can't bring yourself to do it.
can't do it.
Uh,
We didn't really talk about the stories, but I don't know if that's a
yeah, I mean,
I mean, like, the overall theme, or I think the reason why I find the game kind of powerful and important.
okay, yeah, we can. We'll start back
Alright,
up.
3, 2,
Oh, thanks, bud. Thanks.
yeah,
We'll start over again. What am I? What am I gonna ask you?
I don't know, like, what you have like, we haven't really talked about plot, like, you're a cowboy, you're turn of the century, what's kinda going on, what's your guy's basic
Okay.
deal, kind of
Okay.
thing,
All right. So, going back to the story, um, you mentioned a few things. Can you, like, elaborate a little bit more on, like, what the purpose and all that is?
yeah, I mean, it's straightforward, it's a good story, for story mode that's being told. It very much I've always liked video games, and they felt like movies. And at some point, this game crossed the line of not feeling like a movie, but feeling like a book. I like to read. I love movies. I love books. The one thing about a movie is, it's 2.5 hours long, and you don't have a lot of fluff. It's very, very strong, character driven. Get to the plot points and go through. It's action. It's exciting. A book takes a lot of time, and with a game like this, it's if you're trying to plow through it, you're looking at 60, 70, 80 hours to finish it. And that's not even doing really anything other than just doing all the yellow missions. The game's so big.
Right.
And so it takes on this really just massive scope of what it maybe means to be a person in a world on your own, or what it's like to be dependent on other people. I mean, you have a story that's kind of at the very end of the 1800s, and you have a guy that doesn't quite know how he fits into this world that's changed. You're very much getting to the industrialization of America. There's a lot of things that kind of stand out in the game, like you see telegraph wires strung everywhere. Like it's no longer the complete natural like world. There's technology. There's trains. I I learned that they were doing inoculations back then. You have to go at one point and help out a Native American tribe that's been or been moved, and you have to deliver like inoculation in the 1800s. And I looked it up, and yeah, that's they had it back then. So there's quite a few like things that I learned about history that I had to look up because I was like, well, the game might be fudging the facts, and then you kind of realize, no, this game is very much in tune with what it was like to be in that time. And I think the thing that really draws me to it is, unlike a lot of standard westerns or maybe standard stories where there's the big bad guy boss and you're the good person trying to save everyone, as I said, this game doesn't really have that. It very much kind of lives in that world where when we look at Hollywood and westerns and books, it very much romanticizes the West. Like there's the strong good person trying to do the right thing and the downtrodden townspeople that need to be saved. And this game really has none of that. It takes all that away and basically says like, they live in a world where they have to do what they have to do to survive, and some people choose easier ways that maybe morally aren't as easy, but like for the gratification of you need money or you need food, it's a lot easier to go around and rob people kind of thing. um, Very much has a strong correlation with a lot of classic western films. There's things that are kind of shot per shot kind of out of a Sergio Leone film. Very much, I don't know, have you ever read the book Blood Meridian? No one ever reads that book. It's considered like the classic modern Western, but it's almost impossible to read because it's so dark and so brutal and so lacking of hope. It doesn't have a good person in the story at all. And the people that you identify with as good people because they're not as bad as the other bad people, well, they all die too. So you have this like brutal world, and in the game, there is a very brutal world that your character's trying to like walk a fine line between, and then eventually he's got to kind of rail against that because he realizes that with the times changing, their lives are changing, and that the role of an outlaw cowboy doesn't really exist when cars are on the forefront of happening and there's all this new stuff that displaces them. You no longer need the cowboy when you have banks and businesses and printing presses and things like that. So it's really about the destruction of a time that we look back on very nostalgically and realize it's not really that great of a time, but we completely destroyed it with the modern world we have now. And I think that's something you don't necessarily get in the Grand Theft Auto games because we've lived in that world. That's the world that we live in. So you don't really marvel or appreciate what it's trying to say necessarily about the past or about your time. You're just like, wow, this looks exactly like New York City. That's more of the wow factor, I think, for those games. But this game's wow factor is really just the scope of the world and the brutality and wandering that you do, since you can get lost in the game for so long. You never really have a clear direction, and you don't have to go from point A to point B, like I said.
Awesome. Um, yeah, I mean, it sounds like a really fun game. I would play it again, but I know that
Yeah,
it came out on the PC, but there were a lot of issues with
yeah, and
not
there's
be.
still issues with the online component too. Like for the past, I think, couple months, like if you get more than 20 people in your lobby, all of a sudden animals don't exist anymore, which means you can't be the trader because you can't kill anything. Sometimes you'll have a night where everyone keeps on getting kicked out, and then sometimes you have a night where just you're the one that's getting disconnected from their network. A lot of the things that have kind of been buggy in the past couple months they fixed, but certainly they're still trying to kind of build this world. And I would say, yeah, it's out of beta, but they're still adding just so much to it. But yeah, I know the PC one came out with all sorts of problems. The nice thing was story mode, other than I think one major glitch when it came out that had to be patched where like it actually came to a point where you couldn't beat the game. Like if you did one mission before the other, like basically your game was broke and broken. English teacher. Um, so so yeah, you kind of in the online mode, you kind of have to live the fact that there's a frustration level when things don't work. And I know like the game got completely destroyed when it came out on PC because they were looking for this perfect product. For something that kind of pushes the boundaries of available technology anyway. I mean, the game's graphics are, I can't think of anything that looks better. The lighting and the shadow effects, just the sheer motion. Every single blade of grass moves on its own. The trees have their own sway. Nothing's seems programmed. You don't find repetition really in the game ever. That tree that you see over there doesn't exist anywhere else in this game. Every tree is different kind of thing. So you don't really have that breaking kind of the moment where you're being pulled out of the game and what feels like reality because you're finding things that are hallmarks of like video game world creations and things like that.
So
But
this
I
is
would say
Go ahead.
It's basically it's a game though that's not meant for everyone. If you're the kind of person who loves Grand Theft Auto, the pace may be way too slow for this game, even though at its heart it's very much the same game. Um, if you're the person who likes to explore and push boundaries, and if you've ever been the person that said, "I wish video games your character could do this or your character could do that," they tried to put everything into the game. They tried to make it so you could almost do anything you wanted to do. The only things you can't do online, or you can't take a bath, and you can't pee. So, for anyone that wants to kill someone and then pee on their body, that's not an option in either story mode or online. Not too sure why though. It should be.
So my guess is this is like a monstrosity of a game, like how size wise, like
Oh, yeah. It's. I mean, it's overwhelming how large it is, and for someone like me that likes to explore, I just remember playing the first one, and my friend and I would play online, and you just stop, and he'd be like, not to sound stupid, but like that sunset looks amazing. And then you're just kind of laughing, like, yeah, the video game looks really good. And with this one, almost everything you do looks amazing. You're looking at the water and you're just like, that stream's really neat. I can see the trout there. I can fish for them. I can attach whatever bait I want and use my casting different ways. And like your interaction with the world is, it's fascinating how much level of detail they put in the game for you to understand. Like the moss on trees grows on the right side. Um, there's strange things you run across and you realize there's a story there. The guy that or girl that programmed that thing to exist in this created a whole story for there that we'll never know why buildings abandoned and why the stuff's there and why there's a hole in the roof kind of thing. Um, but yeah, they very made it so like if you're an inquisitive person or you like story or you just like that you can do anything almost you want in a game, it's that kind of game. You can start playing the game and really accomplish almost nothing towards earning money or experience or anything and have a great time just roaming around chatting with people and crashing into trees and tripping over rocks and things like that because that's what your horse does. Your horse apparently has really bad rocks on ground detection. So,
yeah.
and nothing's worse than two horses hitting each other on a head-on collision. It's really meaty, gross sounding when it happens.
Ugh, gross. Um, all right, I don't actually have any more questions. You have
Oh,
anything else you want to add to it? You got anything
no.
additional you want to say?
Well, I mean, for like anyone that is interested in the game, I know you can get it used for pretty cheap. And right now, I think it's what is it, only like 30, $35 now. It's always on sale. It seems it's been out for over a year now. But it was one of those games that was anticipated when the first game came out, and then it never seemed like it was going to come out. Then it kept on getting delayed and delayed, and but it certainly was worth the wait. I remember walking away from the first game going, I don't think I'll ever like a game better than that first game, and I don't think there'll ever be a character greater than the character in the first game. And then this game came out and it answered that. Yes, this game is better in almost every way, and the character experience is a lot better. However, I went back and started playing the first one again, and the first one feels like a more arcade version. It's a lot faster paced when you loot people. It doesn't take forever, and you kill animals and they don't have different pelt levels or like the level of detail of everything you do is a lot simpler so the game goes by faster. So if you get Red Dead 2 and it seems really slow, I'd get the first one graphically, it still holds up, but it's far more of an action. Some of the characters are a little less realistic, a little more like character hammy kind of classic characters like the drunken Irish guy and the old mining inspector kind of person show up in those games. And the new one really tries to steer away from a lot of the cliches so they could create people that seem far more realistic that you could apply and identify with.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and hanging out with me and showing me your nipples on your shirt.
Oh yeah,
Uh, oh, look at my nipples. That's from the last podcast.
it sure was. I wasn't there.
Anyway, I appreciate this has been Be Good 77 Red Dead Redemption. Please, it was just me interviewing, so if you have questions that you want to ask, feel free to put them underneath in the comments section, and I'll make sure I get with Brandon here and get these questions answered for you.
Yeah, no problem.
So thanks again for showing up, and
All right,
this has been the Nerdlore podcast, and y'all take it easy.
peace.